term I use called the pedestal illusion, or the illusory pedestal. There's a few factors that make it seem like a beautiful woman and her sex, access to her body, is like this, is a pedestal, is like above you, and you have to get it. The courtship paradigm, where you had courtesans or courtiers who were the male members of the court, non-nobles, or I'm sorry, non-royals. So they weren't the noble class or the royal class. They were, successful merchants, and they basically weren't like at the upper classes. They were more the middle class, and they're hanging out in the court. And they want to seduce a woman. They want to basically entice a woman from a higher class, the noble class. If you're a merchant, you're going for the noble class. If you're in the noble class, you're going for, a princess or something like that, a queen, a duchess. In that situation, yeah, there is a pedestal. There really is a social hierarchy there. And so you need to, in order to get them into sleep down or fuck down, she shouldn't do that. That's going to hurt her status. And it's going to hurt her value in terms of her marriage value. And because that's, in the Middle Ages, women, or basically for all human history, women got married for political reasons, to make ties with other families, build empires, build sort of your political network. So there's many reasons why that duchess should not sleep with this courtier. So what's his job? He's got to entice her to do something she shouldn't do, and that's the definition of seduction. That's the true definition. It's that seduction has been sort of the meaning has changed because this courtship phenomenon got romanticized as societies around the world came out of monarchies, came out of this rigid sort of royal, untouchable, or royal, divine family, and then we started getting out of that, and things started becoming more democratic. And so now the middle class grew. So now you don't have this ladder, this clear ladder. What you have is a huge clump of like regular people who don't really need to seduce, the men don't really need to seduce the women, but they think they do. There's a deeper level where women, going back to the agricultural revolution and before that in more paleo hunter-gatherer times in certain tribes, not all, but a lot of tribes, and the reason why I say not all is because we can look at tribes that are still that way now in pockets around the world. Some see women as like property and some don't. Okay, so it's never been like, okay, boom, now this has changed, but women being property of men and their value being based on their lack of sex, their lack of sexual history, because their value is essentially making babies. So that's part of where the pedestal comes from, is we're still sort of trapped in this ownership, which then became courtship. And courtship is just a nice word for ownership. So the paradigm is you need to do things to get sex from her, because she shouldn't just have sex with you. That makes her less valuable, easy, a slut, whatever you want to call it. In fact, it's funny, what's like the lowest profession? The one that gets the least respect is being a prostitute or a whore. Prostitution, in countries where it's legal and sort of more respected and well governed, you see less divorce rates. Okay, you see lower crime. So I think there's definitely a correlation there. And yet that's like the worst thing a woman could be, is a whore. But the premise there is that a woman should not have sex. When you get rid of that, then a prostitute is a pretty awesome job. I mean, as long as she enjoys it. It's no better or worse than any other service that someone would provide. So that just illustrates, how we view sex in terms of that just illustrates how we view female sexuality. Female sexuality is bad. Women should not have sex. If they do, they're bad, they're easy, they're low value. And that's illustrated by a prostitute basically being like the lowest job you could have, right? So that's the main part of the pedestal, is that this paradigm, or this frame that our culture and many cultures around the world share, is that a woman's sexuality is bad, that she should not have sex. And that her value is based on her lack of sexual history. Now, another part of the pedestal comes from the fact that men are proactive in the sexual process. Men tend to be the initiator. Men are just biologically more aggressive. We have more testosterone. We're bigger and stronger. We are not risking really anything sexually. I guess there's a risk of STDs, but as a man, you're not really thinking that. You're just like, yeah, I want to fuck this woman, and I have no reason not to. So because of that, men tend to take the initiative, tend to be proactive. And if you step back, if you were like, let's say, an alien visiting Earth and you were observing men and women, it would appear that men wanted sex more because they're making the effort, they're taking the initiative. So if you think about making a deal and you have two parties, they both want something and to a sort of a mutual benefit. Basically, the party that wants the deal more, that wants the outcome more, they have less power, they have less value. And that's a fundamental part of deal making. Don't look like you want it more than the other person. So, applying that to the sexual process, it looks like the man wants it more. So his sexual value goes down. So you can see how these two factors are working together to make it look like a woman's sexuality is a woman's sex, having sex with a woman, getting sex from her. First of all, it looks like you get sex from her, but that's not actually how sex works. You give sex to her. She receives, she gives to you. It's a giving, receiving. You're not getting anything from this woman. You can't only control her in terms of like she's your property. You know, same with anything in life. You can't take it with you when you die. You know, all you're getting, I guess, is the experience, but you can't get this woman. You can't get her vagina. What you can do is give. It's the not realizing this that will make you bad in bed, that will make meeting and connecting with women difficult. It's not that you're trying to get, it's that you think you're getting, but you're really not. In other words, you're not in touch or aligned with reality. And that's where all problems come from in any part of your life, is when you're not in touch with reality. That's why deception is the bad thing, is the one we want to get away from. Deception is required when you're seducing a woman off the pedestal, when you're trying to get her to have sex when she shouldn't, right? Deception is when you lie to yourself and tell yourself that you're not good enough, or that you can't do something. You know, when you... Deception also happens on a societal level, where society is telling you things, collectively, the memes that are out there, media, and it just snowballs, and everyone starts accepting these ideas, and then it just gets perpetuated, from generation to generation. We just accept all these things that were never true in the first place, or are no longer true now. They're no longer relevant. Perfect example of this is the monkey banana study, where they had the monkeys in a cage or whatever. They set the banana up on this ladder. Every time a monkey tried to go up and get the banana, they sprayed all the monkeys with cold water. So So really quickly, every time a monkey tried to go up the ladder, the other monkeys would beat him before they got sprayed with water. So then they started replacing each monkey with a new monkey that hadn't had this water training. Each monkey would try to go up and get the banana, they'd get beat, and at some point, you know, all the monkeys that were in the cage, this banana sitting up here, none of these monkeys had ever actually been sprayed with water. And yet they would beat each other when they try to go get the banana. And basically none of them were trying to get this banana that's right there. So would they have gotten sprayed? I don't know what the scientists were up to, but you know, it's a really revealing study. So, you know, that's sort of just an example of like how we think, okay, how do I talk to girls? How do I date? Perfect example, bringing it back to sort of the initial focus of this talk is there's this assumption that what women want is a relationship or a bond of, they want an investment, and the man wants sex. So the woman wants like love or, you know, a boyfriend wants sex. The man wants pussy. And that's not true at all. But we're just raised to think that. Women are taught to pretend that. They're taught that that's how they should be, and they probably over time, I'm sure, you know, try to convince themselves of this and try to get their mind right. But you can't change how you're wired. You know, the biological wiring doesn't change. What changes is the mind. And we're all just sort of trying to cope with this. And what I'm trying to do is point out these flawed premises. I'm trying to point out the flawed paradigms, the misguided paradigms. So what we have is we're in a period where women's sexuality is actually emerging. It was always there, but it's actually coming out, and women are more comfortable being sexual. A big part of this is they don't need to be good girls in order to support themselves, in order to have stability in their lives. They don't need to be virtuous to find a good husband so that he'll support her. Women are supporting themselves. Obviously, it's not totally equal, but I think on paper it is. And that's different than even back with in the 1920s when women weren't allowed to vote. So even on paper, women were lower citizens. They weren't as valuable. So fast forward to today, what you have is a situation where women are actually way more open to, let's say, open relationships. However, just like any relationship, any connection you have, you would be sad, you would be upset, you would be hurt if that person just disappeared on you. Even if it's like a guy friend, he just goes, he just disappears, and you're like, dang, I haven't talked to my buddy Steve in, 3 months. That sucks. Well, what if you find out that Steve just wanted to come over to play your Xbox games, and he never actually liked you, and he has no intention of ever speaking to you again. So even as a guy, you'd feel like used, you'd feel hurt, you'd be like, dang, fuck Steve, Well, that's what, hopefully your name's not Steve, that's kind of what happens with guys when they're dealing with women, is they'll try to get sex. Once they get sex, they disappear. I've done that. I'm sure any guy who's slept with more than a couple women in his life has done that. There's reasons why guys do that it doesn't make guys bad, but I think that kind of behavior, that abandoning a woman or sleeping with her with absolutely no intention of actually connecting or having any sort of friendship in addition to the sex, comes from a misunderstanding of female sexuality. What I mean by that is we are taught that women aren't sexual. They're not interested in sex. What they are interested in is a relationship, is connection, is rapport. They want a conversation. They want romance. This is compounded by and if you notice, I keep bringing up like compounded, complex, complicated. I'm trying to kind of paint this picture of how like skewed and kind of messed up our perception of really something that's right in front of us and is wired in us and that we already know through misinformation, through brainwashing, through not maybe even deliberate, just cultural memes that we're born into, that we accept. And they're compounding each other and creating this complex, almost like I picture like this bombardment of like misinformation. If you're born into something you have no frame of reference, it's very hard to see outside of it. And so getting back to this sort of abandonment thing. So dating multiple women, your biggest challenge, you're going to have, your biggest challenge really is yourself. It's your understanding, or what I call awareness in the ACT leadership system, awareness, understanding women in general and the woman right in front of you as well. So a collective awareness, and then paying attention to the individual. She's not a chick. She's not, I mean, you can use those words, chick, woman, girl, lady, whatever. You can use these words, but, you're not looking at the concept of a woman when you meet a woman. You're actually looking at an actual human being, right?
Yeah, right.
The challenge you're going to have is, first of all, that awareness, understanding how women really are sexually, and understanding what's going on with this individual woman to the, in the amount of time and in the amount of time you have, to the best of your ability. Because, like I said in the beginning, each woman is going to have a different history, a different identity, self-esteem, different place in her life, different factors going on that will make her more or less interested in finding a monogamous relationship, or wanting to find a guy, wanting to settle down. It's going to vary. It's going to vary with her menstrual cycle, how horny she is. It's going to vary with her sexual history. Has she had good sex? Does she orgasm during sex? Has she figured out how to do that? Has she figured out how to relax enough? Does she know what she needs to do to get off? If not, sex is not really going to be a big motivator for her until she has good sex, right? Just like I always use the example, sushi. Before I had sushi, I didn't like sushi. I thought it was gross. Then I had sushi. Now I love sushi.